And we
Hey,
are live. So welcome everyone to Live at Epiphan. It is, of course, Thursday, I think. It is 3 o'clock, I think. All time has lost meaning in these crazy times.
it's true.
Today we have a super exciting show. And joining me is Adam Palmer,
Everybody,
one of my colleagues on the support team here. And
that's right.
today we are going to be talking about chroma keying 101, how we might do it with a pearl, why you want to do it, some of the things you can do with it, and all of those things. And since I am not an expert in this, we enlisted Adam's help, who is much more of an expert than I
Thank you,
in
thank
how to
you.
do this. So he's going to be sharing you tips and tricks that he has learned over the years and how to do all of this.
Mm,
So what are some of the things we might use chroma keying for? Green screen is obviously the most obvious one that comes to mind.
yeah, of course.
I think when it comes to green screens, again, we have to think, why do we want to use a green screen? Well, right now, obviously, probably the most relevant reason that everyone finds themselves today is for video conferencing.
Yeah,
I'm doing that right now. I've been most of our staff. You're not. You're doing a very practical set,
that's right.
but
If I had a
a
green screen, I
lot
would
of
be
us.
using it.
Well, exactly. And so we've had a mix of staff doing green screens versus practical sets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've done the green screen thing. Our colleague Matt has done the green screen thing, but a lot of other people have been doing the practical. I guess the other big reason, and one of the areas where I guess you have a ton of experience, is doing this as a post-production piece.
Yeah, in my previous life, I was kind of a visual effects guy, animation compositing and chroma keying. Even though you're doing it all on the computer, it's still an incredibly useful tool because it transfers across any program. I think that's one of the most powerful things about it is that it's not a specific technique. It can be used on almost anything, and yeah, it's a great way to sometimes do workarounds for stuff when you can't get something working exactly the way you want. Sometimes the chroma key is just the nice way to get it done.
Yeah, and of course, I think everyone's probably familiar with how heavily utilized that is in basically every major Hollywood production today, whether
Yeah,
it's suit tracking or environments are rarely practical these days. Everything's shot on a soundstage on a green screen for most of the, especially anything that's coming out of Marvel, for example.
oh yeah, I mean,
So that's all pretty common stuff, but it does also demonstrate how powerful it is. And if you
mm,
have that stock footage, you can continually manipulate it in 1,000 different ways because you essentially have a semi-blank canvas, which is really, I guess, the point, right?
yeah, and the concept is so simple and versatile because all it really is make the background a color that isn't a color anywhere else in the shot and then remove that color. It's so simple, but yet that simplicity I think is what makes it so versatile, so powerful.
Yeah, exactly. So, like you just said, I guess the main thing is talking about layering things, removing one particular color. Um, so, technically, I guess chroma keying can be done with any color, but there's kind of some general rule of thumb there as well.
Yeah, so I mean, the big problem is obviously human skin tone, right? So human skin tone is basically kind of an orange, and so anything even getting close to red, yellow, really bad idea, right? Unless you're making a movie about blue aliens, the Blue Man Group, then you maybe could have a red background, but generally the colors that we tend to use are going to be, that neon green that you see a lot of, and also blue is also used a lot too, and you'll see later on even I've done blue as well because sometimes you have a lot of green in the shot, and so
Right.
you need to use
Well,
something else.
funny enough, that's one of the challenges that although we use green screens and not blue screens here at Epiphan,
Mm.
it's actually one of the challenges we've run into all the time because our corporate logo color is nearly green screen green. So
That's right.
it's
Yeah.
the kind of thing where if I wear one of the black company shirts we have that has a green logo on it, I look like I have a hole in my chest when I'm standing in front of a green screen.
Yeah.
So those are
Exactly.
some of the reasons why you also have to be careful when you're using green screens or blue screens or any chroma to make sure that you stand out in contrast to that color.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing too is if you're wearing clothing that's white or very light, that's going to absorb a lot of light. And so if you have a green screen behind you, if you have a huge wall of solid color, tons of light is going to be bouncing off that wall, and it's going to be going all over you. Then the computer isn't going to know, is that green on your shirt the green that you want me to remove? Or
Right.
so it is very important to be cognizant of the colors that you're wearing, not just, oh, is it green matching the green behind me? But if you're wearing a white t-shirt, it's going to be really, really tough to stop that. We call it spill, and that light spilling onto you and then really screwing up the whole chroma keying process.
Well, we used to do it a lot in one of our demo studios in the office, but it had this big white desk, and
Oh,
just the reflection of lighting the green screen and bouncing off the white desk meant that my face would be partially green. And so when I would try and key it, half my face would be cut off because
yeah,
half my face was getting a green reflection.
that's right.
So there's definitely those things to keep in mind, and that's definitely going to come into some of our tips later on when we're talking
Yes,
about lighting, which is
100%.
hugely important when it comes to this.
It is. Yeah.
But just for fun, I was playing with this earlier, my invisible cup here, because I am using a green screen right now.
Right.
My glass kind of fades and disappears into the background with some lighting. So just an example of some of the weird things that can happen when you're playing with things. The other day, I was drinking coffee out of a mostly green mug, and every time I went to take a sip, my mug vanished in front of my face. It was pretty hilarious.
Invisible
Um,
mug.
exactly. So there's lots of these little weird, weird things you have to be cognizant of. Um, so let's look at, I guess, diving into some of these tips,
Yes,
because the results can be hit and miss if we're not kind of following some good guidelines and making it
exactly.
as clean as possible. So let's
Yeah,
let's look at lighting. And I know we have an example of a project that you and I and Cameron worked on for a video that you guys produced.
that's right.
I had the easiest job; I just had to stand there. Um, but
That can be
the
tough.
amount of effort you guys put into lighting that
Mm,
was making my head hurt. So
yeah,
maybe we'll look at some of the samples from that and talk us through some of that.
yeah, definitely. So one of there's two big challenges when it comes to green screen lighting. The first one is you want that background to be as even as possible, right? So you don't want to have a bright spot where the light's very bright and then some dark areas over here, because that's literally changing the color, right? The computer is seeing that as different colors, different shades of green. So the first challenge is getting that in even color. And the best way to do that actually is to, if you can move that light, the light that's going to be lighting up the green screen, the further away you can move it from the green screen, within reason, obviously, right? Because a lot of us are dealing with small spaces. But if you can move that light far away, what happens is that the hot spots become, less of a hot spot because the light's further away. It's more even. The second biggest thing is diffusing that light. And you don't have to get a big fancy thing. In the past, I've done, I've bounced the light off of cards, I've shone them through, wax paper, anything that just prevents the bare bulb essentially from hitting that screen. And
Right.
that's just because that point source of light, like a bare bulb, is going to create a lot of shadows and very
Right.
hard shadows. And that's definitely a no-no, again, because we want that that background to be totally solid, one color. And so any way you can diffuse it. I've even done stuff like just pointing the light at the ceiling. I even have that going on now.
Which is what I'm doing right now. Two of my lights that are primarily filling me out are actually bouncing off my ceiling because
Right.
they're so close to me and I have no extra depth that if I actually
Exactly.
pointed them at me, there would be so many crazy shadows behind me that my green screen just would not work at all.
Yep.
Um, the flip side to that, I guess, though, is that if they are super far away, you might not necessarily be getting enough light on the green screen, and you might need to fill
Yeah.
that. So in my case, I have another light that's on actually going up onto the green screen itself, kind of on the floor behind me to my
Yes.
side, to just fill the color to make sure that I'm not getting weird, just temperature gradient in the green screen to make sure it's an even color, not just from a hotspot perspective, but from a darkness perspective as well.
Exactly. You got it. And we did that. We did basically exactly that for the shoot that you're seeing on the screen now. We had lights on the ground too, just to make sure that again, the background was as even as possible. But definitely bouncing it off a white ceiling or a light color ceiling is great, because then that screen is only receiving bounced light, which is way softer, almost no shadows, and is just going to generally be more even. The other kind of key with lighting, and this may not come up as often for people in their home setups, but for our setup that we had there, it definitely came up. But the problem is that if you have a bright light source behind you, this big green screen blasting all this light onto you, if there's any dark areas, on yourself or on the area that you want to not green screen, those shadows are going to kind of get filled up with this green kind of ambient light. And so another kind of big important aspect of lighting for green screen is to actually have a light behind you, or a light shining onto those bright areas. So that way the light that's hitting those bright areas is brighter than the light that's bouncing off that screen. And all you need to do is just make sure, as long as that light is just a little bit brighter than the light coming off that screen, that light's going to replace the shadows than that green kind of ambient wash will. And it's not so big a deal with you, George, because you're wearing a black t-shirt, which is awesome.
That's intentional.
Yeah, as a visual effects guy, I'm like, perfect, right? Because there's almost no spill on a black shirt. You don't even have to worry about it. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, you could probably mitigate that by just simply choosing which clothes you wear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing there is, that's important. Wardrobe's important. Lighting is important. And we've talked many times in some of the recent webinars and on this live show about the 3-point lighting thing as a very basic lighting feature. In general, 3 points, when we're talking about green screens, 3 points might not be enough. You might need more once you start to build in some of the things we've been talking about. The other one is, of course, perspective. So the video sample that we've been showing, is a very short clip, and I encourage people to go check out this video afterwards. It's on our YouTube channel, of course. Just talking about using Epiphan pearls in education. It's a cool video, but essentially, in a perfect world, and timing just didn't work for a variety of reasons. We actually wanted to go to a university lecture hall and shoot this video. But due to a number of things, it just wasn't possible at the time. So we decided to fake it, essentially.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to do that was to shoot the green screen and do some compositing to put me in a virtual lecture hall.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we delivered. And Adam, you did an awesome job of kind of fine-tuning all of those elements.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of people just like, I can tell, but I'm sure a lot of people didn't even notice. You know what I mean? So that's an example of, but again, when we were shooting me standing in front of that green screen, we had an idea of what we wanted it to look like ultimately. And so we had to make sure that what we were shooting was the right perspective, because once it's shot, there's nothing you do about it.
Right. And you make a really good point about perspective, right? So, an example of doing it totally wrong would be, we'd shoot you on the green screen with a very wide angle lens, and then the background plate would be shot with a very zoomed in lens, right? And so, totally different kind of perceptions of space, but also the angle too, right? So you'll notice in the clips that we just showed before, the angle was all the same. So when I went into that 3D virtual scene to create that 3D virtual background, I made very sure that all the camera shots, the virtual camera shots, were all coming in at the same angle that we shot the real one at. And I even tried to match the focal length of the camera as much as I could too. So that way you don't get as much of a sense of depth warping. But actually, on that note, we did have a bit of an issue there, George. I'm not sure if you remember, but, and it was kind of my screw up too. But again, talking about perspective, we had a table in front of you, and we were filming with a table at first. And the issue I realized is that a table is a very good object to tell you that something's wrong with perspective, because it's a very simple box shape, and you can really easily see right away that the perspective isn't right. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the angle of the camera that we really shot with, the real camera, to perfectly match the virtual camera. And you could really tell on the table. It just wasn't working. It didn't make sense. So we eventually had to replace it with a virtual table.
Exactly.
And as soon as we covered it up with a virtual table, it was fine. But that's something to think about. If you're worried about perspective, you may want to really stay away from very strong perspective forcing kind of lines. Like if you have shapes in your scene that are very square and very obvious, you want to maybe stay away from that. A human being is much easier to kind of get away with, because the shape of the body isn't so square and perspective, right? So it was easy to put you in there, but the table we had to eventually take it out and put a virtual one.
Exactly. So some of that, is a very high level thing. So if we break this down and kind of summarize some of the things we've kind of touched on, one of the things that can be big value for chroma keying right now can be using it within a variety of different functions. They can do a lot of different things. And one of the first things I'm going to do is I, by no means here in my home office, have the best chroma key green screen setup, but I'm actually going to reveal it because what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about how to do this on the Pearl 2 and some of the ways we might need to fine tune it. Right. And to do that, since of course neither of us is in the office standing in front of that green screen, the next best thing I can do is reveal my green screen, and we'll play with this. We did not practice this. We did not rehearse this. We're going to do this on the fly, and it might go all terribly, terribly wrong. But as you guys can see, I'll turn it back on again in a second here. But I'm doing chroma keying through some software into Zoom and into the call that we're on, and then of course eventually out to the live stream to you guys. But you can see I have the green screen behind me. I have it lit, and then I have some stuff that's doing a background replacement for me, and it's actually doing a pretty good job considering that I have a very minimal, somewhat janky setup. So, and I didn't even iron the green screen. So anyway, but there's lots of ways of doing this. Let's talk about and play with how we would do it on a Pearl. And it might not be that smooth because it's kind of getting translated a few times before it reaches the Pearl we're playing with.
Yeah. This is
yeah. So for those of you who don't know, the Epiphan Pearl 2 can do chroma keying. And that gives us a really flexible tool to do all these things we've been talking about in a live stream, which can be super cool. So let's look at that. Cameron, our producer, is hiding in the background, and he's been playing with the Pearl UI here to exactly play around with these things and see how we can manipulate it. So I'm going to try and sit here and pretend to model while you guys talk about how this works.
That's good. Yeah, the actor should just stay quiet and stay in position, and so the technicians can do our work. Yeah. So, okay, great. So you're seeing it up there now. Yeah. So basically, it's pretty simple. Obviously, first thing to do is we're gonna pick that color, obviously, that we want to get rid of, right? And so you'll see there that Cameron's brought up that color picker selector. And he's gone ahead and selected that background color. And so we're getting the initial key just on default settings as they are right now. And so the first setting we're really going to look at is that threshold setting. And that's essentially, ultimately how aggressive is it at getting rid of that color. And maybe we could play around with, too much. If we do too much, it's going to be really aggressive. It's going to get rid of everything, and even George will disappear. So the first thing we want to do is get that nailed in as close as we can. And like we said, this is live, so it may not go perfectly smoothly here. But Cameron's going to play with those numbers a little bit, and I think he's going to bring it up to maybe make it slightly more aggressive here. Okay, yeah, getting better. We're losing more and more of that green. We still have George, so we're good to go. Beautiful. So he's just changing that number and then hitting save down below to update the contents. Good. We can keep going. We've still got George. Perfect.
That's getting better.
Really nice. Now, another thing you can do too is if you notice that you notice there's kind of a spot over George's right shoulder that was really tricky. Sometimes if you notice there's one area that's really giving you trouble, you can unpick that color and then go back and pick the color for that one spot and see if maybe if you choose that color, because there's variation here on the green in George's green screen. It's not perfect. Sorry, George.
No, it absolutely isn't. And part of that is because there is a slight shadow still there. And so the green is actually darker right here at my shoulder over my neck than it is everywhere else out here in the open. And Marco just mentioned in chat here that my glasses reflect the green screen. Any solutions for that? Well, funny enough, we were just talking before we went live that not only do I need to replace these glasses for a number of reasons, but they actually have an anti-reflective coating on them. And if you've ever had those on your glasses, they reflect green just from light in general. So it's actually partially not reflecting the green screen. It's actually just reflecting light as green. So is there a solution for that, Marco? Yeah, don't get reflective anti-reflective coatings on your
Yeah,
glasses.
glass, let me tell you, is
Or
very tough to deal with.
exactly, or ideally, don't wear glasses at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no easy fix for that, and yeah,
right.
you just have to be
And
really careful what's going in front of the green screen.
exactly. And Tim kind of followed up with that, saying, solution to glasses is light placement, which is absolutely right. Unfortunately, in the limited space I have here at home, unlike when we were shooting that video, I remember we spent a few minutes adjusting lighting to make sure there was no reflection on my glasses.
That's
But
right.
here at home, I don't have that option, partially because I have minimal placement for lighting. And then on top of that, I have two bright monitors blasting me in the face. I can't do anything about those.
No.
And that's actually the majority of the reflection you're seeing in my glasses is my monitors in front of me. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that.
I
So
should point out too, George, that on that particular shoot, someone did suggest, "Oh, well, why don't you just take the lenses out of George's glasses?" But we use a teleprompter during these productions, and George is literally blind without his glasses.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, without a teleprompter, I am useless, and without glasses, I can't even read it. So, no, that's not true. But for those scripted sessions, I do need the teleprompter. Otherwise, things will go off the rails pretty fast. And if I can't read it, it's not very helpful. And I'm not a contacts kind of guy. So, it is what it is. But Marco, it's a great point that if you have someone on camera who has glasses, it introduces a whole new complex variable that there are ways to solve it, but you got to work at it. Anyway.
So we only have about 8 minutes left. Do you guys want to play
Time
around with
flies.
bringing in some of the other media elements, Adam, or do you want to do that on the other layout?
Yeah, we can talk about that. I guess we were just playing with this here, and I think Cameron got it dialed in pretty well.
Yeah.
All things considering, in terms of you can still see a bit of green edging on me and stuff like that. But overall, that's pretty quick and dirty, and
It's pretty
it works.
good. And the one setting we didn't really talk about is this kind of edge blend setting, and that's the setting. If you could just turn it off real quick, Cameron, just to show people what it looks like without, and then with. So once you have that threshold dialed in, the aggressiveness of how much green is getting taken out, that edge blend is just that final kind of sweetener that just it blurs the edge a bit, and it just helps kind of smooth things out. So you see, without that, it's a bit, it's not bad, but there's definitely some weird artifacts going on there around the edge. And once Cameron applies that edge blend, and again, this is another thing we're going to tweak. And sometimes you got to tweak the threshold and the edge blend together a little bit. But you'll see, once he's done that now, way better, right? A lot nicer edge. And the thing to remember with green screening, I see this mistake often, is that it's better to take away too little than to take away too much. I've seen lots of people who they go really aggressive and half their face is missing, right? So
like this.
There you go. Yep. So, err on the side of taking away less. It's please err on the side of taking away less.
Yeah.
I mean, do we need to say anymore? Look at that.
It's all
That's
in
scary.
good fun. It's a good time. And one of the things that where people might run into that a lot right now is one of the other use cases for this, and that's in video conferencing. And we'll talk about bringing in other elements in a second, but some video conferencing applications have a form of keying built into them.
That's
background replacement is usually what they call them, but they're essentially doing a keying either based on chroma keying or luminance keying or a mix of both, luminance being black or white, chroma being a color. So funny enough, we were playing with it earlier, Adam, where you turned on the Zoom background replacement, which is just a mess of algorithms, essentially, that honestly most of the time works really well, and actually works awesome when you have a green screen like I have. But when you turn it on, because of the lighting that you have coming through the window there and everything else, it doesn't know what to do with your face. So, that's an example where if you're going to do this, even in Zoom with just trying to clean up your background, it's worth the $40 investment to get a green screen, even if it's not that well lit. So anyway, the nice part about the way Zoom does it is that it's an automatic algorithm, so you don't have to mess around with those settings, and it's actually quite good at it, surprisingly. So that's the thing. The other thing we can do, and this is a big one, is bring in other elements, like shooting a person on a green screen, doing it at a video conference. That's all cool. That's actually probably starting more difficult. The next one is actually a great one that's easy, and that's bringing in outside elements, keying them for overlays and things like that. So you built a cool little kind of test play tool that lets us do that. So maybe Cameron again will guide us through some of that.
Yeah, and this idea kind of came from my, visual effects kind of compositing, right? So in this sense, what I have here is I have a whole bunch of animated elements that I've made in various programs, After Effects, Premiere. It doesn't really matter where you make them, but a lot of these titling programs will do the same kind of thing, right? Where you have animated titles. And so all I've done is I've taken all these little pieces and I put them into one video file, and I made each one take just a little bit of space on the video file. And that way we have one video input coming in with about 5 or 6 elements on that one video input. And then what we're doing is we're just kind of cropping, the little pieces that we want. So in this case, Cameron has cropped out the Epiphan logo. And you'll see that I put a blue background on this one because the Epiphan green is there. And so he's just keyed out that blue background using the Chroma keyer like we showed earlier. And so now we have an animated transparent logo that's just kind of floating there. And now that he's got that keyed out, he's going to be able to, scale it down. He just did it and pop into the corner there. And that's just playing on a loop. So that's just playing off of a computer that we have. It's a video file just looping. And it's just going to keep going like that. And so now we have an animated element that looks really fancy. And it actually wasn't that hard to bring in thanks to Chroma keying, because otherwise to get transparent elements, it can be pretty complicated. But the green screen just does it for us. So that's really nice. And so now he's going to bring in a kind of a lower third that I also did. So again, all these elements can often be times fit onto a single image because these elements aren't taking up the whole page. So we don't have to worry too much about resolution. And so you see here, he's got the lower third, and so the lower third is an Epiphan green, which is a problem. So I did the part that we want to remove in blue. And again, it's just another looping animation. The lower third comes on, stays for a little bit, and then comes off and stays off for a little while. And the way I set up those animations was just that when it would go off, it would kind of stay off for about 5 or 10 seconds. So if you wanted to switch to another layout that didn't have that lower third animating off and on, you had lots of time to do that. If you set up your loops so that they keep coming back on right away, it might be really hard to switch at the right moment. So give yourself some time with these elements, let them come on and off and have some time in between. And then it's pretty easy to switch between layouts if you want to, as the animations are coming off and on. So it's almost kind of like a way of cheating transitions. So now we've got an animated lower third that's playing there, and that's really cool. And I also, what other kind of elements did we have in there? We had the...
so there was a clock, there was an animated background.
The countdown. The countdown's pretty fun, actually.
Yeah, there's some good ones there. But I should point out that, you did this with a video file, which is cool. But if someone needed to do something really, really basic, especially in the terms of maybe a lower third, you could do this in PowerPoint if you wanted to. All you'd have to do there is create a PowerPoint slide that's animated with the content you want, make sure it's a blue or a green solid background, and then essentially, just bring that in and into a Perl 2 over HDMI from your computer, key out that background color just like we're doing here, and that's it. So you don't need to do the Adobe Premiere build a video file style of things. You can do this very easily with simple applications. Again, just making sure you have the right elements set up to key things out and bring them in. So this is really easy to do. Really, really simple and pretty cool. There's of course tons of samples out there as well. We were playing around with one, adding ourselves a virtual guest.
That's right.
We'll see if we can add our friend here. But it's just really, really fun stuff to do that with. And again, it's like with a lot of things, and we tell people this with the Perl 2 all the time in terms of building layouts and using images or other elements. The real limit is only your creativity. Sometimes it's hard to get started. It's hard to get the initial ball rolling. But once you get a handle on some of this, which was actually the point of what we wanted to do today, is that once that's going, it's just your creativity from there. So that can be kind of cool and a way of doing
There
it.
we go.
There's our friend.
Watch out,
It's
George.
a little rough and dirty because I'm bouncing back and forth between the screen share and what's feeding in.
Exactly. But this is a YouTube video that's a green screen with some weird animated alien walking around, and there you go, right? So there's lots of cool ways of doing this, bringing these extra samples in.
And this is playing live right off of YouTube, right? We have a computer showing its desktop on the Pearl, and we're just grabbing that element. So you're right, George. It really doesn't have to be complicated. People are often intimidated by these things and they don't want to jump in, but just jump in. Make mistakes. Get messy, and oh, there we go. There's another beautiful little thing. A really simple little animated background. You can get stock video of animated backgrounds for next to nothing. Dirt cheap or completely free. And so now we have a really nice looking layout that, isn't static, right? So you can have these animated backgrounds, you can have animated elements on the Pearl layouts, and it doesn't have to be complicated at all. And you can use the chroma keying to help do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of summary. If anyone has any questions for Adam on how great this stuff is, Marta actually asked in chat, Adam, how did you make the countdown? Again, that was just in a video.
That was actually and actually that was the YouTube countdown. So I didn't make that. I want to put that out there. That's the YouTube has a countdown before a video premiere, and so I really liked their countdown. I just thought that would be cool if we could, could that work as an animated element? So I just grabbed that and I just did a quick color replacement and replace whatever was there with green, and then we just threw it into the Pearl, and now we have a countdown that you can actually see through, see behind. So
right.
Again, you don't, as long as these elements that you're using obviously are royalty free and you're allowed to use them, you don't even have to really create this stuff. You can just go out there and find what's there, and don't be afraid to experiment and to test these things out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure everyone has seen the endless threads and comments about people being creative with their Zoom background replacements and stuff like that, and including our own Matt Renault, who's done a bunch of those. He likes to do.
Do we have that clip that we can jump to?
I don't know if we have it, but he likes to do these little gags
give me 2 seconds. I'll get that up.
Yeah, with little gags of video clips as his Zoom background replacement. And again, it's creativity. It's expressing yourself in your content, and ultimately, when we're creating content, that's what we should be striving for.
Definitely.
So there's a couple questions coming in here. Tim was asking, does the animation eat CPU bandwidth? And in that terms, I mean, what we're doing there, Tim, in terms of playing that media file and then putting that output into Pearl and then cropping it. Yeah, the computer that's playing that video file obviously is under a little bit of load just to play the video file, but it's no different than any other video file, really. So yes, there is obviously some load there, but it's not significant. You could be doing other things on that computer at the same time if you wanted to.
And we've even done stuff like running a looping video off of a Raspberry Pi. It's a $30 microcomputer that runs off USB, and you can just loop a video off of it. So you don't even necessarily need a full blown computer to do this stuff. These microcomputers that are coming out now, the Pis, they're dirt cheap and they're incredibly powerful, and it's a nice way to bring an extra something to your setup without a big huge thing that you need to have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Marta was just saying, yeah, thanks. I thought you manually put it together in After Effects or something, digit by digit, in terms of your countdown. No, that would be too much work.
I wanted to, but we didn't have the budget.
Yeah. But it's funny you say budget though, because what we ended up doing for that education video we were showing earlier actually ended up being a very low budget in comparison to what it would have cost us to go on location for basically what would have ended up being an entire day of shooting. Right. Instead, we did it in a couple of hours in the office and no one had to go anywhere. Right. So, this can actually, once you have it set up, especially if you're in a place where you can establish a studio that has a green screen that you can drop all the time, this actually, can save money in the long run. So yeah, Cameron was scrolling through the subreddit for Zoom backgrounds, and there you go, with 152 upvotes, is our very own Matt Renault with his Zoom background replacement. So if how did you do that? Well, how did Matt do that? So Matt is actually sitting there, but he pointed a fan at his face and made sure his shirt was blowing in the fan and his hair, and then replaced his Zoom background green screen. He has a green screen like I do. Replaced it with stock video footage of a motorboat going down the lake. So there you go. I mean, you could have done this on a Pearl as well, using chroma keying. So these are some of the fun things that this technology allows you to do. So go forth and be creative, I guess.
Yeah, and please share your stuff with us, because there's so many things you can do that we haven't even thought of yet, and we'd love to see what kind of ideas you guys come up with.
Absolutely. So next week we have a couple of things. One of the things we have next week is a live stream on a product update launch. So this is a update that's coming to the Pearl family of products, and some other notes and some other things we're going to talk about. That's next week on June 9th. That's a live stream. So that's Tuesday. What day is it? I don't even know. Pretty sure the 9th is a Tuesday.
Just let Google tell you when to get up, and
yeah, or something.
Tuesday
exactly.
Confirms.
Yeah. So join myself.
If you look at our YouTube channel, you'll see the event on there too.
Exactly. And of course, we have stuff on our website all about that, and all kinds of things. So join myself and Dave Kirk next week to talk about that. Really looking forward to that. And for those of you who use your pearls professionally in the field, there's going to be some stuff you're going to be really interested in. So don't miss that. The live show this week, next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, we are going to be talking about some of the results of what we're adding into pearls. And that's talking about some of the future things of live streaming. So I think that'll be an interesting one. I kind of wanted to say what it was, but I didn't want to totally spoil it. So I'm going to go with the no spoiler way.
Awesome. It's exciting, so for sure.
That's where we're at. Chroma keying can be an awesome tool. It can add a ton of depth to your video production. You do have to practice it. There are some gotchas, but when you nail it, it can be an amazing creativity piece, and can add a lot of depth to your live productions. So use it, enjoy it. And I think we've mentioned this in previous shows. The green screen I have behind me, true, I did not iron it, but that's a $20 Canadian piece of green screen cloth, right?
Right.
So that's like $2 US. It's pretty cheap to get this. I have it on a stand, but you can hang it on a wall. You could do whatever you want. You can pin it down so it's super tight and you don't have to iron it. Whatever you want to do. The demonstration we showed earlier in that clip, that was paper. You can buy paper rolls of green screen material or blue screen material. And anyway, there's tons and tons of ways to do it. It doesn't have to be expensive. So it should be fun. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us anytime, of course, info@epiphan.com. If you have suggestions for future live show episodes, feel free to shoot those over to us in an email. And as always, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, do all those socially clicky things on all the buttons. We live stream every Thursday live at Epiphan at 3 o'clock Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, if anyone's watching there, probably not. And we've also been doing a ton of webinars ever since the beginning of March. Yeah. So check out epiphan.com/webinars for past and upcoming webinar episodes. There is a ton of content you might find interesting there in a lot of things. So check that out. Till next time, thanks everyone for joining.
Bye, everybody.